Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm just going to talk for a few minutes, but give Johannes most of the time for this lecture. Just for those of you who may not be familiar with the John Rylands Library and the Chinese collections that we have here. So the collections themselves have been built up over successive generations from the 19th century into the 20th century. And we now hold approximately 700 Chinese items. It does depend a little bit on how you count as to the number in total that we have in the collection. This is the John Rylands Library. It opened to the public on the 1st of January 1900. And it was really due to this woman, Enriqueta Rylands, who was the widow of John. John had died in 1888 and left a fortune of about £2.5 million. He was one of very successful cotton millionaires from Manchester in the 19th century, made a great deal of money from the cotton manufacturing and distribution. And he left that fortune to Enriqueta, who was his third wife. And Enriqueta decided to spend some of this money on establishing a library for the citizens of Manchester. It opened to as an independent foundation funded by an endowment left by Enriqueta. But in 1972, it became part of the University of Manchester. And so we now hold the special collections for the whole of the university, merged with the Rylands collections and those that had been collected from the 19th century onwards as part of the university institutions. The Chinese collection in particular was part of the library of this gentleman, the 25th Earl of Crawford. And Mrs. Rylands purchased a collection of more than 6,000 books and manuscripts from his library, known as the Bibliotheca Lindesiana, after the surname of the Crawford family, the Lindsays. And it had been assembled by himself, Alexander, and also his son, the 26th Earl Ludovic. And at that point, it included about 450 Chinese items out of the 6,000 that Mrs. Rylands purchased. So the Earl of Crawford's collection was, his library in its entirety was vast. It included a large number of printed books as well as manuscripts. But in particular, the acquisition that came to the Rylands was of the non-European part of the Bibliotheca Lindesiana. So this includes, in addition to those 450 Chinese items, there's about 200 Japanese books and maps and manuscripts and print from across the Middle East. There's about 500 Arabic manuscripts, 1,000 Persian, a similar number from South Asia, and the East Asian collections make up this purchase that was acquired, say, in 1901. The Chinese collection in particular, Crawford managed to build that up very quickly. His first acquisition, as you see, was in 1863, and most of the collection came together within that decade, the 1860s and early 1870s. The first purchase was from the collection of Pierre Leopold van Alstyne, who had died the previous year in 1862, and his son was selling off his collection. And Crawford made further acquisitions in the next few years, both from booksellers in Britain, other collections from continental Europe, and in addition via agents in China. In particular, the two gentlemen mentioned on the slide, Reverend Joseph Edkins and Reverend Alexander Wiley. There was a catalogue published while it was still in the possession of the Earl of Crawford. This was in 1895, so this is a screen grab from that catalogue. And there have been various attempts to improve the cataloguing over the previous 120 or so years. In 1991, a hand list, an unpublished hand list, was produced and this is still in use for some parts of the collection, but it has been updated for the project, which began in 2014 in partnership with Beijing Normal University. And this outcome was a published catalogue in 2 volumes, which was produced in 2018. In addition, those 3 catalogues I've just shown you screenshots from, we've also made available as PDFs. And so I'll add some links in the chat after I finished talking before the end of the lecture, if you would like to go and have a look at those catalogues for yourself. They're all available online as PDFs. So following that, the publication of the catalogue, Johannes worked with us starting in 2018, first of all to produce a report, making great use, I would say, of the BNU catalogue in order to survey the collection and highlight particular collection strengths and potential avenues for further research using the collection and highlighting individual items that were of significance, of particular significance. Following on from that, we've been working with Johannes over the last couple of years to launch an exhibition. It would have been launched this time last year, September, in fact, 2021, but for obvious reasons that's been delayed. We're very pleased that we were still able to do it and very grateful to Johannes, even after moving on to his new postdoctoral project, to continue working with us to produce this exhibition. So I hope that those of you who are near enough to Manchester will be able to come in and see it. There's a couple of shots of the exhibition space. And Johannes will talk in a little bit more detail about some of the items that are shown in the exhibition, as well as extending across a few other things as well. And in addition to the exhibition, we've just launched a digital collection for the Chinese collections. This highlights just 17 in total at the moment, significant items from the collection. Obviously, out of 700 items, there's still much more work potentially that we could do for digitization, but it's a start. We've started somewhere, and especially there are a few particular highlights from the collection, which we hope by digitizing them and making the images available will encourage others to have a look at them in more depth, and we hope find out a little bit more about them. Just a couple of particular highlights, something that we have had work from, I think going back about a decade now. Professor Yang Wenzheng, part of the University of Manchester, discovered this item in the collection, or realized its significance, about a decade ago. This is an album of engravings, which was produced in Beijing. There were 20 engravings of the European palaces in the Empress Summer Palace, plus in addition an extra watercolor, which you can see on the screen, which was added to the album. And this was sent to Paris directly from Beijing, probably in 1786, just after it was produced. This is an example of a rather large collection that we have of watercolors painted on pith, which were produced for the export market in the 19th century. We have about 50 of these albums altogether. And in addition to digitization, we're also working on a conservation project at the moment to conserve and make these albums more accessible. The third item I wanted to show is something that Johannes will talk about a bit more, and it has helped us in particular with the design and the theme of the exhibition. And this is the Jiangxi birthday scroll. So it's 2 scrolls, in fact, more than 20 meters in length, both of them. And these represents the procession for the birthday celebrations of Changxi Emperor. And as you can see on the screen and also in the exhibition, one of the limitations of the screen and both the display cases is that we can only see a very small part of the scroll, a small part of the 20 meters. So we've been working with our library development team to actually produce a platform where we can move through the scroll, the whole entire length. You can zoom in and out and see the detail. This screenshot is actually from the digital interactive screen that we have in the exhibition space. So it highlights particular elements from the scroll and gives some explanation. And we're very grateful the work that has been done on this by PhD student at Manchester, Anastasia Akulich, who I think is also on the call somewhere. So thank you to Anastasia for the work that she's done on that. So I'm going to pass over to Johannes now, who will talk in more detail about some of the themes that have come out, both of the collections, also his own research interests, and have fed into the exhibition.
Thanks, Pete. All right. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really glad to be here with you this afternoon, virtually, at least in Manchester. Many thanks to the Manchester China Institute, Pete and Will and everyone for making this possible. This talk, I'm excited to have the opportunity to just speak, say a few words about this exhibition, which I have curated with Julianne Simpson. And yeah, as Pete already said, I'm a postdoc fellow at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and greetings from the Monastery of the Cross, actually, where I'm currently located. So yeah, I would like to start with, oh, I can't move my, okay, that seems to work. Sorry. I'd like to, yeah, just give you a quick overview on the talk. I basically introduced the collection in a few minutes based on what Julianne already said, and also the exhibition, also our approaches when we curated this exhibition. Then in a second step, I will focus on the multilingual aspects of the collections, what they tell us about the Qing Empire. And then finally, in a third step, I want to say a few words about the wider pictures and how we should, in my view, see the Qing as the last one in a series of multilingual empires in China. So, I mean, I will actually switch back and forth a bit between 2 and 3. So we'll talk about the Rylands items and then also about the wider picture. So, okay. Just a few words about the significance of these collections. I can't actually see my own screen for some reason. Okay, so I'll just read it from the paper. Zhenji, historian, and yeah, the late Zhenji, honorary director of the National Library of China, he once made this very succinct statement on the collection. I just want to quote that in full because it really gives you an idea of what is contained in the John Rylands Library here in Manchester. These books are like a summary of traditional Chinese culture. They include the 4 books, the Sishu, and the 5 classics, Qing, the 100 schools of thought, all the classical writings of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, books on astronomy, the calculation of the calendar, history, geography, medicine, literature, writing, phonetics, character dictionaries, zidian, word dictionaries, cidian, and calligraphy, music, painting, encyclopedias, Leisu, writings on statecraft, collectania, and so forth. Nothing from the traditional categories of classics, historiography, masters and philosophers, and Beleth is lacking. So yeah, and also then he mentions, of course, the early Christian missionary activities in China, especially by the Jesuits, also the Jesuit translations made in the late Ming and early Qing. All of these are to some extent contained in the collection here in the Rylands. So that really should hopefully give you an idea of the richness and diversity of these collections, first of all, okay, which mirrors, of course, both the diverse interests of the collectors, but also the diversity of Chinese culture, or Qing, Ming Qing culture itself. So here you can just briefly have a look at these four categories. That is also the system of classification used by the Beijing Normal University Catalogue, which Julianne just mentioned, which I have used extensively also in my work on the collection. So basically all the items would fall into one of these four categories, yeah, the classics, historiography, masters and philosophers, and so forth. And this is, of course, a very elegant system of classification, not just a traditional one, but it's still in use. Yeah, as I said, the BNU catalog still uses that as its bibliographical system. Yeah, so just to give one example for this, yeah, we have the books on, you see the number Roman 3 masters and philosophers, and then at the bottom the books on teachings of the ancestors, 宗教 or religions, as it is sometimes translated today. Yeah, and then we would find items such as this one, also one of the highlights really of the collections. We couldn't show it in the exhibition, but it is on the MDC, the Manchester Digital Collections now, since 15 October. So that's a Buddhist sutra, a religious text, religious scroll, and of course, I mean, even this item actually alludes to the multilingual tradition, which is the topic of my talk today, because while the item itself is completely Chinese, it is written in some form of literary Chinese, as you can see here in the picture. It is, of course, a translation. It is, of course, a translation from Sanskrit or a Prakrit or some Central Asian language. Yeah, so this was translated several times. The flower adornments sutra, Huayanting, in the so-called period of division and in the Tang Dynasty. Okay, so even with many items we find in the John Rylands Chinese collections, they are written in Chinese, but they are actually translations or also sometimes transliterations of Sanskrit text in Chinese characters. You know, that the Chinese characters are used as a kind of yeah, like we would use the Latin alphabet to transliterate Chinese, for example. Okay. These four categories, of course, they were not the kind of the system behind our approach to the exhibition. We focused on different aspects of Chinese history and on the Qing in particular, aspects that are not immediately visible in this traditional bibliography. So for example, multilingualism, of course, that's not just an example, that is the topic of the exhibition, the main focus of the exhibition and also of this talk today. Then other aspects we focused on in the exhibition, but I won't talk about them today in any detail, are the military and also everyday culture. So for example, this Kangxi birthday scroll, which Julianne already introduced, it contains what is probably the earliest depiction of smokers in China and also of tobacco shops. I'll actually show one image of that later briefly. So let me see. Yeah, this is basically my central slide. I want to give you an overview here before I go into a bit more detail about some of these languages and scripts. Just an overview of how many languages and different scripts as well are actually contained in the Chinese collection. So we call it the Chinese collection, but that doesn't mean obviously that everything here would be written in Chinese, right? First of all, I mean, we could look at these languages, we could classify them in different ways. Yeah, one obvious way, of course, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Chinese, Manchu, Mongolian, Uyghur, and Tibetan. Those are the we might call them the cardinal languages of the Qing Empire. I'll say more about that in a moment. All of these languages, or rather scripts, we would find in public spaces to some extent in the Qing Empire, especially, of course, Chinese and Manchu. Manchu as the language of the Manchu people. That's number 2 from top to bottom. Of the language of the Manchu people who founded the Qing dynasty in China. And so they obviously, Chinese was not their native language. Okay, and then we have all other kinds of languages here. Actually, we have I can just go through it quickly. Sanskrit, number 6. Tangut, which is a dead language actually by the time of the Qing, but it is a language of another group of non-Chinese empire founders and earlier in the history of China. Yeah? I'll get into that also in a bit more detail later. Then even we find Arabic, we find Hebrew, 8 and 9. Again, these languages, Arabic and Hebrew, of course, are not imperial languages in any sense. They would, of course, not be used in official proclamations or anything of that sort, but rather by certain constituencies of the empire, more or less privately, or we could say as lingua sacras, in the liturgy and so on. The Hebrew text was produced by the Jews of Kaifeng, who had a synagogue in Kaifeng since the Song dynasty actually. And then 10, 11, 12. Here we have German vom Himmel, then Latin and French. So these are, of course, not inside languages of the Qing in any sense, but rather outside languages that are now circulating in the empire due to the increasing presence of Europeans in Qing China, spoken by merchants, scholars, missionaries, and so on. And then number 13 and 14 again are languages of China's neighbors, Korean and Japanese. And then finally, Paxpa, that's not a language, that is a script, number 15 here in the middle. And I'll also say more about that in a moment if I have time. That is a new script invented by the Mongol rulers of China a few centuries before the Qing, as a universal alphabet to write all the languages of the empire, such as Chinese, Mongolian, Persian, and so on. So this is actually a very innovative symbol system, this Paxpa script. A few more details to what I just said, just to give you a bit more overview on all of these languages. Maybe I should also say that I was quite surprised to find that many languages in the Chinese collection. I mean, I had, of course, expected to find Manchu or perhaps Mongolian, maybe also Tibetan and then Uyghur as the 5 cardinal languages of the Qing, but still that there would be even like, Tangut and Hebrew and Arabic and so on. That was kind of a surprise, and it really shows, I think, how multilingual this empire actually was, and not just the Qing, but also earlier empires, of course. Yeah, so of course we would have expected a certain number of languages here, but perhaps not that many. So at least that was my feeling when I worked with collections since 2018. So yeah, these 5 languages and corresponding scripts are basically the 5 most important ones. I mean, they would really be used. We could also call them imperial languages. Yeah, they are systematically studied also by Qing scholars. They are used in official edicts or inscriptions, mainly, of course, Chinese and Manchu, but also the other 3 to some extent, Mongolian, Uyghur, or Chagatai Turkic, and Tibetan. Yeah, so and then just to give one example here for Tibetan, yeah, why Tibetan? So the Qianlong Emperor and other Qing emperors, they had, and I mean that has been researched really extensively by other scholars, such as Pamela Crossley and Mark Elliott and so forth, of the so-called New Qing history. They used different phases, so to speak, to present to their different constituencies. So the Qianlong Emperor in particular, I mean, he did that really well. We could say he would depict himself as a Chinese Confucian scholar, you know, at the desk with the typical tools of the scholar at hand. Then also as a Manchu or Mongolian warrior on horseback, or here, as we see in this picture, a painting actually by one of the Jesuit painters at the court. Here he would appear as a Tibetan style bodhisattva, or enlightened being. Yeah, so and I mean, you can't probably recognize that very well, but in this painting there are also many little how can I say, annotations in Tibetan, actually. So that's just one example for how these scripts, all of these scripts I have been showing to you, how they were used, in official imperial depictions or propaganda, if you will, but also actually in everyday life. And I'll actually say more about that in a moment. These 5 cardinal languages are also, we chose to use them as the exhibition logo, as it were. You see here the entrance in the John Rylands Library of Manchester, the atrium, basically when you walk up the stairway. So you have the word Qing in Chinese, Tibetan, Uyghur, and Manchu / Mongolian. It's spelled the same way in this case. Only in this case, the word is spelled identically. So you only have 4 scripts here, not 5. Okay. Right. I need to hurry up a bit. All of these languages, I basically already mentioned them when I showed you the initial slide, right? You have languages spoken by Qing China's neighbors, Korean and Japanese, and then these languages of Europeans who are now present in the empire as merchants and missionaries and so on. And actually a few of these European scholars, especially the Jesuits, they were also highly multilingual. Just one example here is Johannes Schreck, a Jesuit scholar. He was a native speaker of some form of German, then he studied Latin, Hebrew, Greek, various European vernaculars, Syriac even, and finally, for missionary purposes, Chinese. It's his tombstone here in Beijing. And again, a few of these languages are simply the languages spoken by founders of other, we can call them non-Chinese or nomadic or non-Han, multilingual empires, as I call them. And there's also one script here invented by them, Pakspa, as I said, so again, Manchu, Mongolian, Tangut, all of these were languages and new scripts, although Mongolian and Manchu are almost the same script, introduced by non-Chinese founders of new empires in what we call today China. I skipped the Pakspa part here, just that would have been to give you an idea of what this is, as I said, a universal alphabet for the Mongol Empire. But just maybe 1 minute for this slide. So if we call the Qing a multilingual empire, as I have just shown you with these examples, I think we should really see it as the end result of a much longer tradition of multilingual empires in China. All of these listed here, the Northern Wei, then the Liao, founded by the Khitan people, the Xixia, founded by the Tangut people, the Jin, founded by the Jurchens, who are actually the ancestors of the Manchus, and then of course the famous Mongol Yuan, and finally our Qing here. All of these were founded by non-Chinese, non-Han, nomadic or post-nomadic people, and all of these, in my view, acted as catalysts of multilingualism and language study in the Chinese world. Okay, so for example, here this dictionary here was created by scholars of the Tangut Empire. That was perhaps the first empire in China that had a distinct language policy, trying to basically spread knowledge about these two languages and make different groups in the empire familiar with each other's languages. So in any case, all of them introduced new languages, their own languages, to China. All of them promoted bilingualism in different forms. All of them also invented new scripts, as you can see here. All of these scripts were invented by nomadic regimes in China, or non-Chinese or northern regimes in China. And actually the underlined ones are the ones we have in the John Rylands. So it's actually 4 of 6. They appear in the John Rylands Chinese collection. I mean, that is not self-evident, I think. I mean, it is really, really remarkable that they all pop up. So there is a certain tradition of transmitting these different literary traditions. So Khitan and Jurchen we don't have, but all the rest is somewhere in the Rylands. Pete, how many minutes do I have left? Maybe just 3, 2, 5.
If you can, that'd be great.
Yeah. I come to the end, then I will just skip the rest, but I want to say a few words about just 2 or 3 minutes about these items we actually show in the exhibition to illustrate what I have just said. So this is a bilingual certificate to the parents of a Qing army officer. It illustrates, of course, the significance of multilingualism, of routine multilingual administration in the Qing. It also illustrates the significance of the military, obviously, in the Qing Empire. So, and basically, what you can see here is that the two forms, I wouldn't say if one is a translation of the other, it's actually hard to say, but they are meant to be equivalent. And you have these terms, military titles, basically, that are systematically always like kept equivalent in different administrative documents. So there is really this attempt to create a multilingual or bilingual administration. I mean, mainly everything is in Manchu and Chinese, not the other 3 languages. Yeah. Here again, I mean, this is just really one of my favorite objects. I mean, Julianne already introduced this. It's the Kangxi birthday scroll, really an amazing thing to behold if you have the chance to see it in Manchester. That would be great. So studying this scroll, and it's really yeah, as we have heard, 20 meters each of them, I think, if I remember correctly. So, and there are always also these bilingual street signs, yeah, in Chinese and Manchu. So you can really gather from that multilingual practices were not just something kind of that was happening in the imperial quarters only, but it's part of the physical material culture of everyday life. Yeah, that is part of the actual city. People walk through these gates, and you can see here and sell their fruits and stuff. Yeah. So again, here another example. Yeah, that you have these smokers and tobacco shops, and also they walk through this bilingual gate here. Yeah. The Tibetan Chinese glossary. Okay, I need to stop, otherwise we have no time for the Q&A. Yeah, so I will just, yeah, it's a pity I couldn't show this, because this is, yeah, I stopped here at this slide actually just to say that we have in the John Rylands this Qing transcription of a famous multilingual hexaglot, actually, inscription created by the Mongols, renovated by the Ming, the Chinese dynasty after the Mongols, and then again transcribed by Qing scholars. So you see again that there is a certain tradition of transmitting these multilingual texts. Okay, and yeah, and I'll just stop here because I have run out of time. So thank you very much.